Hello, my name is Kaan Topuz, and today we will be going over my presentation on the symbol of struggle and liberation in the Middle East, the Kalashnikov rifle, otherwise known as the AK-47. So to start off the presentation, let's go back in history a little bit and learn a little bit about the origination story of the Kalashnikov rifle. So the Kalashnikov originates from Russia and was designed by Soviet Mikhail Timofeyevich Kalashnikov. The true name of the rifle is the Avtomat Kalashnikova Oborets 1947. It was the creation of Kalashnikov's free time while on discharge from the Soviet Army between 1946 and 1948. Kalashnikov started designing the rifle when he overheard of several soldiers complaining about their weapons. Being a soldier himself, he took it upon himself to create better armaments for the soldiers who were complaining. Kalashnikov needed to create a weapon that would stand the harsh weather, lack of advanced weapons knowledge, and extreme operating conditions of the battlefield. For this reason, when Kalashnikov developed the rifle, it was heavily tested in development competitions, where it proved incredibly reliable and resistant through various hard battle situations. Kalashnikov's design ultimately would end up winning the competition, putting the weapon into production. So some more technical information about the AK-47 is that the weapon has a 30 round standard magazine, but it can also be used with 10, 20, 40, or 75 drum mags. The AK is bored in 7.62 by 29 millimeter, which is a larger round that packs a combination of short to medium range and a decent amount of stopping power. The AK is a long stroke gas piston operated weapon that allows the user to shoot in select fire of single or fully automatic modes. A unique aspect about this weapon is that it only consists of 8 moving parts in total 87 parts, making it extremely easy to manufacture as well as service. Because of the loose tolerances of the weapon, it can operate with debris or find non-fine-tuned parts. This also means that it can easily be serviced without requiring specialized machinery. These various factors made the AK-47 such a great weapon and would ultimately result in it being adopted by the Soviet Army. Over the years, there have been various enhancements and iterations made to the weapon. The base framework of the AK-47 has been the blueprint to many other successful weapons. Some of these weapons include the RPK light machine gun, the PKM general machine gun, and numerous other AK variants such as the AKM, the AK-74M, and the AK-109. So now that we have talked about the history of the Kalashnikov, the creator himself, as well as the technical specifications of the weapon, some of the reasons why it's so successful, let's talk about how specifically it emerged in the Middle East as one of the most prominent weapons. So the first entrance of the AK-47 was actually at the hands of the creators of the weapons themselves, the Soviet Union. This was in 1979, a response by the Soviet Union for a call for troops initiated by the People's Democratic Party of Afghanistan, otherwise known as the PDPA. The PDPA was largely supported by the Soviet Union because of their communist ideals. The leader of the party, Hafizullah Amin, my apologies for the pronunciation, was killed and replaced with Soviet Barbak Kemal, which sparked outrage. So the Soviets were essentially trying to bring back communism in the Middle East and to make sure that the party that was in power at the time had a Soviet leader so that Soviet ideals could be pushed, including communism. This very quickly resulted in the creation of a common enemy known as the Mujahideen. This was a group that was composed of various other guerrilla groups that were all fighting for Islamic revivalism. So the word Mujahideen, or properly spelled in Arabic on the slide, is roughly defined as any individual or group that battles for their faith, specifically Muslim of origin. And as protests and demonstrations grew stronger, the Soviets reinforced their operations with over 100,000 troops, and they did send the, at time, cutting-edge weaponry, including the AK-47. Upon the AK-47's entry into the Middle East, it was very quickly noticed of the advantages of the weapon over other weapons. So it was ideal for Soviet troops and security forces that were already on the ground. Uh, the reason why was because the simplicity of the design. Its low number of moving parts made it easy to take apart and reassemble, with many soldiers being able to disassemble and reassemble the weapon in less than a minute. Its simplicity had further been shown in the ease of its integration for forces that have never handled the weapon. The AK had a simple operating procedure which required little training. Furthermore, the weapon was shorter in length and lighter than others, weighing around 10 pounds, making it relatively easy to handle and relatively accurate. The weapon has an effective accuracy range of up to 350 meters, making it a good medium range weapon. Its standard 30 round mag made it efficient for engaging multiple targets as well. Overall, its durability and reliability was a large shipping factor. Loose clearances, as we talked about, and minimal parts in the weapon would resist jams and other issues caused by debris or other residue. Furthermore, if anything like this happened, such as a jam or blockage, the ability to quickly disassemble and reassemble the weapon could very well save a soldier's life in the middle of a battle. This was particularly important in a place like the Middle East, where sand, mud, and other debris would be a not so easy operating environment for most weapons in use. So the Russians in the Middle East, despite having strong weapons such as the AK-47, would eventually be succumbed. It's also important to note that the United States was a part of the story because they were providing support to the Mujahideen and effectively participating in a proxy war. Guerrilla forces were supplied munitions as part of Operation Cyclone, which included Stinger rockets and one of the first AK clones ever created, the Egyptian AK-47, which would eventually later become known as the Mahdi AK. The conflict between the Soviets and Mujahideen would be called the Soviet-Afghan War, and it would continue for 9 more years, eventually coming to an end in 1989. The Soviets and communism in Afghanistan would, again, like we talked about, succumb to the Mujahideen. After the long conflict, the only thing that was left in the shadows was the great AK-47. By the end of the war, the AK-47 was prominently known in the Middle East. Many soldiers had the chance to experience it. Whether it was salvaged from the Soviets, it was provided from the Americans through the Mahdi AK, etc. But as we previously mentioned, the weapon was being manufactured in Egypt, and this first clone would eventually become known as the Mahdi AK. This was possible due to the Soviet Union themselves. They had trained Egyptians in AK manufacturing processes and even gone as far as to establish a factory in Egypt. This factory was known as the Mahdi Company for Engineering Industries, and for a period of time they produced genuine AK components and even delivered fully functional firearms. While the Soviet Union eventually withdrew from Egypt, the factory continued to operate because the skilled workforce and also the machinery was left by the Soviet Union. Despite being one of the first variants or copies of the AK-47, the Mahdi is still actively the infantry rifle for the Egyptian armed forces and still regarded as one of the most reliably built AK-47s that is possible for one to get. Because the Soviet Union did not possess a patent or copyright for the AK-47 until 1997, many countries and different organizations made copies and variants of the weapon because of its impressive shown combination of performance and reliability. In fact, the issue of patenting and proper production of the AK-47 still remains an issue for Russia nowadays. Officials at the Kalashnikov group report that of all globally produced AK weapons, only 10 to 15% of them are produced legally following Russia's production laws and copyright laws. Um, because of this, the lack of copyright, it created a boom of AK variants on the market. It is estimated that there is over 300 plus variants created and available for purchase on the market today. Variations allowed for tweaks to be made to the weapon, including optimizations on cost. With production now diversified and the market saturated, the cost of the AK was becoming much more reliable, further enforcing its reach into areas like the Middle East, where many armed groups and militias were looking for affordable weapons and American options and other options, first of all, that they would be denied from or they would be unable to afford, now offered them a solution which flooded the market, especially in the Middle East, with AKs. So as we just talked about, the market was largely becoming saturated due to the amount of variations and copies of AK-47s being created. So let's talk about the actual cost of an AK-47 in the Middle East. Now that it was being manufactured in the Middle East, the prices had hit all-time lows. A report from Global Financial Integrity showed that the price of an AK-47 largely depended on how far it traveled, with a larger travel distance instigating a higher price for the weapon. Reports say that in Afghanistan, an AK could be purchased for as little as $600, versus where when it has traveled to, for example, the U.S.-Mexico border, it would cost double at $1,200. The weapon's authenticity also plays a large factor into pricing. The report stated that in Pakistan, an authentic Russian AK-47 can cost as much as 1,200, while a locally produced copy it only costs around $150. It's important to note that many regard the reliability of authentically built AKs as higher, and they hold a higher value. Even Russian officials state this in their fight to minimize the black market. They state that the Russian AK is more reliable, has higher accuracy, and is just overall better built. So let's talk about one more AK-47 clone. The reason why this one is notable is because it was actually produced in the Middle East. This clone was known as the Iraqi AK-47M, which was nicknamed the Tabuk AK. It was a modernized version of the base AK with minimal changes and modernizations. The nickname Tabuk AK is a reference to the Battle of Tabuk, which was Prophet Muhammad's famous battle in what is nowadays Tabuk, Saudi Arabia. The Tabuk AK was Saddam Hussein's method to reliably provide arms to his troops, given that his country had ill affairs with the Soviet Union. For this, uh, Saddam Hussein uh, contracted the company in Yugoslavia called Zastava. I believe I'm mispronouncing that. Who provided the man force and the machinery to Iraq to be able to produce the AK. Once they were producing the weapon, Iraq was able to successfully remanufacture or reverse manufacture the weapon, allowing them to produce it themselves. Again, the production of the AK-47 in the Middle East largely dictated the price and flooded the markets once again with very, very cost-effective AK-47s, allowing various militia groups and other insurgent groups to uh, fill their populations up with the weapon. On this slide is also an image of a gold-plated Tabuk rifle, which Saddam gifted to one of his closest generals. The rifle was recovered from Iraq during Operation Iraqi Freedom, and it is on display at the Naval History and Heritage Command Center. It is inscribed with Arabic writing scripture, reading "Gift of His Highness President Saddam Hussein, President of the Iraqi Republic." So it is definitely a very special rifle. You can see some iterations between the original design, from the folding stock and the shorter barrel on the front. So, despite Russians losing billions of dollars per year on the fact that the AK-47 is largely cloned, it's important to note that despite these issues, they are still widely successful due to the AK platform. Between 1950 and 2000, Russia was largely in control of the global arms market. At times, they reached 40% market share of global arms sales, and they averaged always above 25%, meaning that they controlled about one third of the movement of weapons in the world. Between 1974 and 1980, the Soviet Union was a key arms supplier to the Middle East. And as reported by the Academy of Political Science, these years saw an average of 60% of the USSR's non-communist sales going to the Middle East. So this can largely attribute to the reason why many AK-47s are still in use to today, um, and why a large number of them were brought over to the country. So, alongside the AK-47, there are various variants of the weapon, also produced by the Soviet Union, that are very successful in the Middle East. These weapons include the RPK-7, the PKM light machine gun, and the RPG-7. Of these weapons, the main one that we'd like to talk about for it being the most popular is the RPG-7. RPG stands for Rocket Propelled Grenade, and the 7 stands for the seventh iteration of the weapon. The main reason why this weapon was so successful is because the Soviet Union excels at simplifying the operations of weapons. The RPG-7 is no exception. Despite being a powerful weapon system, it is easy to use, which made them deployable for most individuals. This also makes it so easy to deploy that children are oftentimes deployed with the weapon. Um, and with an ex-CIA officer saying that he has seen during target practice, I've seen teenage Afghan kids nailing the outline of a tank. They're so easy to operate, it's a dream weapon for insurgents. So its ease of use makes it easily integratable for most and makes the training curve for them very low. So similarly to the AK-47, the RPG-7 has been extensively cloned. This has created a large market population, which means that the weapon is often available on black markets in Middle Eastern countries for as little as $200. The weapon is an explosive device that can be used on a wide array of targets, um, including fortified positions and moving targets that include vehicle and aircraft. The weapon has an effective range of about 1,000 feet, maybe less, but it largely depends on the operator's skill. The RPG-7 has created somewhat of a negative legacy similarly to the AK-47 due to its success. The RPG-7 is often utilized by insurgents and results in mass casualties to American and other armed forces. It's important to note that despite it being cheap and easy to use to the point where a child could use it, it is extremely deadly. So an example of a time where it caused mass casualties to American and other armed forces was in 2011. An RPG-7 was used in an attack against a CH-47 Chinook heavy lift helicopter that was transporting American military personnel in Afghanistan, along with some others. Three rocket-propelled grenades were fired at the Chinook helicopter. The second round made contact with the aft rotor blade assembly and caused destruction of the assembly. The Chinook helicopter hit the ground within 5 seconds, which resulted in the loss of 38 individuals. On board were members of the U.S. Army Guard, Afghani commandos, and an Afghani interpreter and a U.S. service dog. So it's clear that while these weapons are cheap, they're easy to obtain, often extensively cloned, they're still very much deadly. So through its extensive use, the weapon has become sort of an icon in the Middle East. The iconic shape for many makes it instantly recognizable um, because of its banana-shaped magazine and wood finish. For many, it's not just a weapon, it's a symbol of oppression, struggle, and liberation. Um, the weapon is often used in propagandist media, such as jihadi videos addressed to Western populations. One of the most famous people who used this weapon was Osama bin Laden. It was often seen in interviews where the AK-47 or a similar machine gun like the RPK light machine gun was in arm's reach of him. This is typically the origination of the Western linkage between the AK-47 and Islamic extremists, which is pretty ignorant. Um, this is also the reason why the AK-47 can be seen as a symbol on various organizational and even country flags. Most notably in the Middle East, it's seen on the flags with the Shahada. I probably pronounced that very horribly, but that is the one of the supporting pillars of Islam, and it reads, "There is no God but Allah. Muhammad is the messenger of God." So I've also added a picture of the flag. It is in the corner right. It's a black flag with the Shahada, and it depicts an AK underneath. So again, the iconic nature of the AK-47 makes it a prime appearance in um, major flags and other items of media as a object of symbolism. Another flag representing the AK is the flag of Hezbollah, also known as Hezbollah, which is a political militant group which operates in Lebanon and nowadays Palestine. The flag depicts a stylized writing of the word Allah and the first letter of the word stretching into a hand, which is grasping an AK-47. This largely symbolizes the AK as a prime tool in the fight for Allah and overall Islamic revivalism. And in this case again is used as a symbol portraying power through fighting using the AK-47. So it's the weapon's initial limited availability made it a bit of a prestige weapon, with many talking about its performance, reliability, and durability of the weapon. Many often spoke very highly of the Kalashnikov. Jihadi leader actually was saying in an interview that he picked up a Kalashnikov, and after feeling the weapon in his hands, he found that it was ready to talk to the enemy. The bullet was in the chamber and it was ready to fire. He felt ecstatic. His joy knew no bounds. So, for many, it was more than a weapon, and for many, the weapon also garnered an emotional connection, giving them a sense of safety in a rugged and harsh environment. Another fighter stated that I think and dream of my rifle as it is my wife, When you shoot it, it is like a moment of confusion until it blasts my target. It is exactly as if you are on the edge of ejaculation. So you can obviously see how serious the connection was between soldiers and the weapon. This could largely be attributed again to the reliability of the weapon and the durability of it. So the fact that it would last for the soldiers through harshest battles and be their allies. Um, so it made sense that this was the case because many soldiers had created pretty serious subject-object relationships with the weapon. The weapon was not just loved by the jihadists, but it was also a personal pick of many American forces over the technologically rich M16. While on paper, the M16 was better in every category. It was lighter, farther, effective range, had a faster muzzle velocity. Despite this, many American forces still chose the AK-47. The main reason was its reliability. The M16 was largely unreliable at the start of its production. It would often jam in critical moments. The gun was also very difficult to maintain on the battlefield, often requiring tools which were cumbersome to carry around. Its AK counterpart was quite the opposite. It was simply built with minimal moving parts, robust with loose clearances to avoid blockages, and more powerful. The AK used a larger 7.62 caliber over the M16's 5.56. Also, the AK's 30 round magazine was a lot larger than the 10 round magazine, reducing the number of times needed to reload for the soldier. The usage of the weapon was not limited just to battle. Its iconic stature makes it a usual appearances at ceremonies and other social events. So celebratory fire is a large tradition in the Middle East, and it is the reason why these weapons can be seen at so many events. Philosopher Nadim Mohsen states that it is an expression of emotions learned by force. There's typically two types of implications for this tradition. It's sometimes one that is often passed down between generations as a symbol of protection of manhood, which is not necessarily a bad reason to have this tradition. Others can associate it with extremist beliefs, an expression of power, etc. Whether tradition or not, the practice is now largely illegal in most countries within the Middle East. In recent news headlines, um, can be the reason to attribute for this, with many headlines over the years detailing casualties associated with celebratory fire, including one in 2016 involving a young girl shot accidentally by a funeral procession, in which an AK-47 was used. So we also must talk about the negative implications of the AK-47. Being so successful, but being something that is used in a negative manner, aka in the hurting or the killing of someone, um, the success of it obviously has a quite negative implication. So it is hard to estimate how many deaths have been a result of a bullet fired from AK-47, but some say that it's in the hundreds of millions, if not more. Some organizations estimate that the weapon is responsible for around 250,000 deaths per year. It is also estimated that in circulation right now there are between 75 and 100 million AK rifles. This makes the weapon the most produced firearm in the world. So, what does the creator of the weapon think about its usage through the years? Mikhail Timofeyevich Kalashnikov was once asked if he felt guilt over the human suffering caused by the AK-47. To this he responded, "I designed the gun to defend the Russian motherland from its enemies. Of course I feel sad and I feel frustrated whenever I see armed skirmishes with the use of my weapon, also for conduct of predatory wars for terrorist and criminal purposes. but it is not the designers of the weapon who must ultimately take responsibility for where the guns end up. It is governments who must control their production and export. From after his retirement up until his death in 2014, Kalashnikov faced many people who blamed him for the mass violence caused by his weapon. He often deflected the statement, but closer to his death, he did admit partial guilt and responsibility in a letter addressed to the Patriarch of the Russian Orthodox Church, Patriarch Kirill. So, in this letter to the Patriarch, Kalashnikov says, "If my assault rifle took people's lives, it means that I, Mikhail Kalashnikov, am responsible for people's deaths." The Patriarch, however, reinforced Kalashnikov's original statement by saying that if his intentions were pure, then he shall receive nothing but praise for his inventions for the motherland. Meaning that if he intended to make this rifle for the motherland, and it's being used elsewise now, then his intentions are other than the intentions of the people who are using the weapon for misuse, and that he is not to blame. Despite this, to this day, many people in Russia still do not stand behind the coveted weapon of their motherland. Um, a statement from a Russian public figure was stated after the installation of a statue of Kalashnikov in 2017. The Russian figure says, "A statue of Kalashnikov, so that's what we should be proud of. If we count how many people his weapon have killed around the world, it could be millions. The AKM appeared after the war with the fascists World War II. So where did it defend our borders? In Afghanistan, Ukraine, Georgia, Africa?" That was the statement made by the Russian public figure. So the statement that we just looked at from the Russian public figure does speak reality to the AK-47 and other Kalashnikov variants, as they have become, as listed by the Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, the most conventionally used terrorist weapon in the Middle East. Among the most common terrorist groups that utilize various members of the AK platform is the Islamic State of Iraq and Asham, more commonly known as ISIS. So, as we have looked at in this course, ISIS is an Al Qaeda shoot off group which is known for their mass brutality and its conquest for Salafism. As we kind of debunked, Salafs are actually generally very peaceful people who do not condone violence. So ISIS is most commonly misrepresented in my eyes as a Salaf group, um, despite being listed as that in multiple different different organizations around the world, including the CIA. But it is known that ISIS used the AK-47 as their primary infantry issue weapon. In 2022, the U.S. Department of Justice reported that ISIS battalion leader Alison Fluke was sentenced to 20 years due to her lead role in female combat training. Fluke provided military training, which included the use of automatic AK-47 assault rifles, grenades, and RPGs to over 100 women and young girls in Syria. So let's go ahead and talk about one of the negative implications of a positive aspect of the AK-47, which is its ease of use and integratability for troops. Um, it's very easy to use, which makes it even a weapon that children can utilize. In fact, in Russia, in early years, many children were taught how to use the weapon and could easily disassemble and reassemble the rifle in less than a minute, even closer to 30 seconds. For groups such as ISIS, who are doing disturbing things such as recruiting young children, the AK-47 is a prime weapon that they can be supplied with, again, because of this ease of use. Um, because of its ease of use, they are the main weapon utilized by these children. It's important to note or look at why these children are being recruited. The UN National Offices on Drugs and Crime says that the children are specifically targeted. The children are typically utilized in propagandist media to shock the public and show a lack of care and ruthlessness of the group. This creates a psychological impact for soldiers who are facing the children. A good example of the psychological impact of using child soldiers can be seen in the film American Sniper, which follows the story of legendary sniper Chris Kyle. Chris Kyle has 255 kills, with 160 of them being confirmed. In a scene where Kyle is set up in Afghanistan on a rooftop, he's faced with a peculiar decision. He kills an insurgent that is using an RPG-7. He then sees a child go up to the body that he killed, examine it, and pick up the RPG-7. The child aims the RPG-7 at the insurgent's original target of a U.S. Humvee. Kyle's mortified as he must take the shot and kill the child, but he is caught in a moment of shock and freezes. The child suddenly has a change of heart and throws the RPG-7 on the ground and runs away. Kyle lets out a sigh of relief and is very happy with the child's decision, almost crying that he did not have to make the hard decision. So this scene depicts the horror and fear created in the enemy as terrorist organizations use children in their operations. No one wants to end the life of a child. No child should be subjected to these terms. The UNODC says that in a 6-month analysis period looking at ISIS propaganda, there were over 254 instances of children appearing in terroristic media. Furthermore, 38% of these images and media depicted children engaging in violent acts. On the next slide, I've added an image that shows some disturbing propaganda that was shared by ISIS that shows a very young child with a AK-47 posted in front of an ISIS flag. So again, this is the image in question. We can see that the child is posed with a AK-47 with the magazine clipped in, so it's unclear if the weapon is actually loaded or not. But children are put into peculiar situations like this to create media that sparks outrage within the world, shows the brutality of the group, and creates traffic on their end. But as we said, no child should ever be subjected to these terms. So, despite the negative implications behind the AK-47, its various unauthorized uses through the world, it's hard to discount its importance. In fact, even to this day, despite many modern weapons replacing the AK-47, and despite many other iterative models of the weapon coming out, it's still widely in use by most Eastern, Middle Eastern militaries and armed forces. In fact, as reported by Al Jazeera, throughout the entire world, over 100 countries utilize the AK-47 as the standard infantry weapon. Um, at the end of the day, the AK-47 is an object of many things. It is a weapon, it is a symbol of liberation, and in general, a part of the history of the Middle East. But most of all, it is an assemblage or a combination of pieces of wood and metals. It is in the control of a terrorist that it is turned into a weapon of mass destruction agony. It is in the control of a Russian nationalist that the weapon is transformed into an object that has purpose in fighting for its motherland. So the key takeaway that I've learned from examining the AK-47, its history and its usage and its proliferation in the Middle East is that it is the man or the wielder of the weapon that creates the meaning in the object. The same object can protect and defend for the motherland as it was envisioned in the eyes of Kalashnikov himself, or it can destroy and end in the eyes of a jihadist who is trying to do negative to the world. Nevertheless, the creation of the AK-47 has resulted in a lasting impact to the entire world, and specifically in the Middle East, where it is still very commonly used. It will continue to live on past and still has and will continue to have a lasting impression on this area. So I thank you for making it to the end of the presentation. I hope I didn't bore you. I hope it wasn't too long. Um, it was definitely an eye-opening and overall just educational experience learning about the AK-47 and its lasting impression on the Middle East. It's really become more than much than just a weapon. It's become an icon, a figure, and something that has just been so heavily used in the Middle East that, again, like we said, it will have a lasting impression. Feel free to leave any comments, any critiques, anything that you would do differently, anything you liked, etc., in the comments. But besides that, it's been a pleasure participating in the course with all of you. I wish you the best in your future endeavors and the most success in your future um, career, etc. Besides that, take care of yourself and goodbye.